Okay, so I said last lesson we're going to have a quick 10-minute chat about epistemology. So Joel, Zach, we will put those away. Ruby as well. We'll talk about some ideas about knowledge. We're going to talk about knowledge and some introductory remarks with regards to epistemology. So epistemology is a really big field. Okay, so we've got metaphysics is about what is real, and so within that we've looked at simulation theory, we've looked at God, we've looked at essence, we've looked at determinism, we've looked at all these things like, are these things real? Epistemology is like, well, how do we know any of that? So here's a little quote for you guys. This is from Zhang Zhui, a Chinese philosopher. Once upon a time, I dreamt I was a butterfly, fluttering hither and thither, to all intents and purposes a butterfly. I was conscious only of my happiness as a butterfly, unaware that I was Zhuangzi. Soon I awakened, however, and there I was veritably, that means truly myself again. But now I do not know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I am a man. Okay. So, one of the questions I pose to you guys is, which comes first, metaphysics or epistemology? And so we've said any claim you make about what is real, okay, any claim you make about it, like the sun exists, okay, you can throw doubt on it, can't you? You can say, well, how do you know it's true? And so then that's an epistemological question. You make some truth claim, how do you know that's the case? All right? And so it would seem, just based off that epistemology sort of comes first. How do we know? But I think the argument on behalf of metaphysics is that it's an assumption to propose that there is something to know. There is something to know is a metaphysical claim. It's about reality. There is something that we can gather knowledge about in order to make claims. But really, they're inextricably linked. You can't really separate them. They're so intertwined. Perhaps a good way to think about it, we have Aristotle who said philosophy begins with a sense of wonder. And you remember we're all sort of, wow, it's so sort of eerie and mysterious and wonderful. So there's that sort of point that things are wonderful, and that's where philosophy begins, and then epistemology informs our philosophy. So I come around, like this is what we were asking you guys about last week, and I thought I'd share some of your answers. So we said, what is truth, what is knowledge, what is belief and perception? And the reason I've put them in that order is because I think they're sort of the same thing, but they're gradations of in relation to you. So from what I could gather, we sort of think that truth is what exists. Everything that is what is true, that is what is real. Okay? And then you have knowledge, which is information that someone possesses, that's information that someone has about what is real and what is out there. And it was interesting, for some people, the information had to be true. It had to describe what is out there rather than just an idea of what is out there. And for other people, as well, you didn't have to be certain of it. That knowledge doesn't necessarily entail that you have to be certain. We also got belief. Belief is like the same as knowledge, but without as much certainty. It's like knowledge, but with maybe 70, 60% certainty. You're less confident on it. And then perception is just the way that you observe what is real. Okay, that's the way you observe it. And you use perception to inform what it is you believe and what it is you know. So that's how we sort of found that those things were related. Now, believe it or not, philosophers talk about different ideas of truth. Okay? So I think when we tend to use the word truth, we tend to be talking about a correspondence theory of truth. Okay? That means when we say what is true, it's describing reality as it is, that our statements about reality correspond to reality. Okay? That's one theory of truth, and when we say that word, that's probably what most people believe. But some people will say, well, we can't access that. It's sort of removed from us. We can only interpret it, and we can only approximate it. We can only come up with a theory that coheres. So it's not necessarily about pointing to reality as it is, but a model of reality. What is all of science but a model that describes something happening? We're not sure of all the exact intricacies, but this is a procedure that describes the process of how one thing changes to another. So correspondence, describing it as it is. Coherence, describing it as it works. Okay? And then when we have that word pragmatic, that's just about what's practical. All right? So, and what we'll find as well is with the different elements of epistemology, some of them take on different ideas of what something means to be true. So for most of Western philosophy, right, people just sort of assumed that our senses told us stuff and reason told us stuff. And Descartes' really the first person who sort of tries to throw some doubt on any knowledge claim. So we're going to compare two epistemologies. These are sort of the main ones you get. You have rationalism and empiricism. And they're sort of having a boxing match against one another. So in the left-hand corner, you've got Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz. Okay, and on the right-hand side, we've got Locke, Berkeley, that's spelled Berkeley, pronounced Berkeley, and Hume. So these guys are empiricists, and these guys are the rationalists. So the rationalists are going to say, reason comes first. Reason is prior to sense experience, and that truth is primarily discovered through our ability to reason. And they rely completely on deductive reasoning. They're like proposition 1, proposition 2, conclusion, and these flow, they're necessarily true. The empiricists are like, reason, you only know reason because of senses. Senses come first. It's how we sense things. That's what's going to tell us about what is real. So they say truth is discovered from all of our sense experience, and it relies completely on inductive reasoning, okay? I dropped the pen, it fell to the ground. I dropped the pen, it fell to the ground again. I did it again, it fell a third time. So we can induce, we can propose, every time we drop it, it's going to fall to the ground, okay? So that's the sort of the difference there between rationalism and empiricism. So we've talked briefly about Descartes. So he recognised, we can't know if we're dreaming or not, okay? He recognised as well as that every experience you have, you can throw doubt on it. He says, obviously my senses deceive me. Look at the straw in the glass of water, okay? I know that it's not really bent or disconnected. I know that my eyes are deceiving me, that there's playing some sort of trick on me. So I can't trust my senses. And so he's like, we need some rational foundation that comes first in order to prove our senses. And so he starts to go through, he thinks of it like a barrel of apples. So let's say there's a barrel of apples. And if there's one rotten apple in the barrel, then it can spread that rot through the whole barrel. So he's trying to tip this whole barrel of apples out, and he's going, what's this sort of first apple? I'm only going to put in the apples that I'm certain of aren't rotten. The ones that I'm certain I can trust. Okay, so he's sort of throwing out everything. I can't know that this evil demon doesn't exist and is tricking me into believing all these things. So I can't trust any of my senses. So he goes right back to, what can I know? And the way he builds up his philosophy is he makes an argument for God. And he says, if God exists, then I can trust my senses. And so he says that has to be more fundamental. The argument he makes is an interesting one. I've spoken with a few of you about it already. It's an ontological argument, and it's good for us to cover it now because we've already done deductive reasoning. So this is a very tricky word argument, okay? It's easy to understand, very easy to understand. It's very tricky to argue against it. So it says, God is that which has every perfection. Okay, so if you think of God, here's God, and all the things that God has, okay, perfection is one of them. All perfections. So what are things that make someone perfect? If they were like all-powerful, unlimited in time, unlimited in space. So he's got all of these perfections. God has all of them. And that's true by definition. Like we say, when we talk about God, we say, well, God is a perfect being in the traditional Western sense of the word. So the first premise you can't really contest because it's sort of a definition. The second premise, though, existence is a perfection. Existence is a perfection. Okay, so it's saying of all the perfections, existence is one of them. All right, and so then the conclusion is, well, God has existence because it's part of a perfection and God is a perfect being. So in this argument, sort of God exists by definition. What evidence do we have to propose existence is a perfection? Okay, there's a reason I've got ice cream back there. I'm sure some of you really like ice cream. And so you can conceive of a really delicious, perfect ice cream. You can imagine it in your mind. And so my question to you Is it more perfect if it exists in your mind or if it exists in your hand for you to eat? Okay? Or the way I described it to the boys up the front here when we were talking about it, think of like your perfect partner. That is the most hot girlfriend or the hot boyfriend you can possibly conceive of. Are they more perfect in your mind or if they exist in real life? If they exist in real life, then you have this perfect partner. How amazing. So that's sort of the justification. Existence is a perfection. God has every perfection. Therefore, God has existence. So it's an interesting argument. I can talk more about it too if you like. So that's how Descartes builds up this philosophy. He says we start with reason. I can be certain that God exists, therefore God is good. I can trust my senses, and he goes from there. But fundamentally, it's about reason. The empiricists say, so we can talk about David Hume, that when you are born, you are a tabula rasa. Okay, that's Latin for blank slate. You have no knowledge, no ideas. You have nothing whatsoever. And then all of your sense experience that comes in, it's sort of like you have all this input, and that's how you learn things. He says reason cannot draw an inference without experience. So he says, imagine you've never had any experiences before in your whole life, and you're watching a game of pool. That's where I've got the pool balls on the back there. You know, and you're seeing the pool balls rolling along the table. Okay, so this pool ball's approaching this one, and he's going, you have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. Okay, you don't know if it's just going to pass through it. You don't know if it's going to hop over it. You don't know if they're going to smash together and explode. Okay, the only reason you can comprehend, well, when this one hits this one, it's going to cause that one to move, is because you have past sense experience that tells you so. And that everything you believe, like about causation isn't rational. It's based on all of your sense experience. And so he says you can't make any rational inferences without sense experience first. So they're the sort of two main ones. We have empiricism and rationalism. And both make strong arguments. You think of rationalism, we can always throw doubt on any knowledge claim. Okay, so we need something to underpin it. But then empiricism, well, we can't draw an inference without any experience. So we wouldn't know what's going to happen to these billiard balls unless we've experienced it before, and then we make an inference based on that experience. Okay, so a couple questions here, have a quick chat, and then we can do some revision for our test tomorrow and or work on your issues analysis.